Hi everyone, I thought I'd take a minute to show you all how I prep, cook, and clean on my Blackstone. There's many videos out there that show you how to season your Blackstone to perfection and many more on recipes and how to cook. However, this one keeps it simple. We're just going to cover the basics of a prep, a quick cook, and how you should clean your Blackstone to make sure that it'll be ready for your next meal. I always like to tell myself that people have been cooking on cast iron for centuries and that this shouldn't be an anxiety inducing process. It's a basic skill that when you do it and use it after a few times, it'll be part of your muscle memory in no time. First, let's cover some of the basics that I use with almost every meal in terms of tools, starting with something as simple as the paper towels. In the US, I use a brand of paper towels, cloth paper towels, called Viva. I like these because they're less likely to shed as you clean and tend to absorb oil more effectively than traditional paper towels. I heard others in the community use shop towels from stores like Costco, possibly similar in nature, and I plan to give them a try at some point in time. Next are tongs, absolutely critical tool for both cleaning and cooking. I think the biggest drawback to cooking on a giant piece of cast iron is the sheer amount of heat coming off of the surface. You get your hands too close, they tend to singe some of your hairs, even though not in direct flame. And if you're pushing around oil or food, sometimes that oil will not just splatter up at you, but splash up at you and cause some decent burns on your hands. So a good pair of sturdy, long tongs will definitely make the process a little bit more enjoyable. Next is my meat thermometer, another tool that I find absolutely critical. I strive to make every piece of meat or food that I cook on the griddle to be the perfect temperature, especially if I have something like 10 steaks on the grill with 10 different temperature requests. Another cheap and invaluable tool that can be picked up for around 20 bucks online, and definitely a quick return on investment if you are cooking $25 ribeyes that you may over or undercook at some point in time. Another absolutely critical tool for me is an infrared thermometer. These can be picked up online for around 20 bucks. I can't stress enough how important it is to monitor your temperatures for prep, for cooking, and for cleaning, especially in the early days of learning your Blackstone. It will take a while to know your hot and cold spots on the griddle and what your knob settings are to get to the right temperature. But I've been using my Blackstone for over 3 years, almost twice a week. And even with me knowing all the different temperature variations and even knowing that I can guess what the temperature is going to be in some spots, I still consistently use my infrared thermometer to make sure that everything is just perfect. Finally, this is a tool that I got a lot of flack for on Reddit, but I found it to be the best scraper so far after testing a number of Blackstone and third-party products. This is a 6-inch stainless steel mud trowel. Most commented that it wasn't food safe, which sent me into a bit of a panic where I reached out to the manufacturer to inquire about the stainless steel and the manufacturing process. Long story short, while it's not labeled food safe, it's a grade of stainless steel that is food safe with no additional chemicals or processing that's been done to the blade that would put anyone at risk. So before we get started, one comment about the cooking surface. As you can see, my cooking surface is not perfect. While the color is consistent, which took a few months to take on, it does have texturing. As you cook, your starches, your sugars, your proteins, your fats, and the use of your utensils, cutting, scraping, shoveling, whatever you want to do, is going to scar your Blackstone in different ways. This is totally normal. It's not a Teflon pan, and the surface isn't meant to be picture perfect. You also notice that I have some exposed areas of cast due to raised welds. Again, nothing to worry about. Next, let's turn on the griddle. I like to turn on the burners to a position where they'll heat my griddle to about 350 degrees. For me, this accomplishes two things. One, it allows the griddle to heat to a temperature where I can knock off any seasoning that may have lifted away due to outside exposure or to remove any kind of debris that may have found its way onto the griddle. Second is at 350 degrees, the temperature is high enough to apply a light coat of oil to ensure that your cooking surface is even more nonstick. The biggest mistake I see people make when cooking with cookware is that they don't raise their pan to temp and then apply the oil. They usually apply the oil and then raise the pan to temp. If I skip this step, I've noticed that certain foods have a higher propensity to stick, not necessarily to the point that it'll ruin my food, but enough that it's annoying. So with the surface temp up to about 350 degrees, I add about a tablespoon of oil to my 36-inch griddle. Unlike when you perform your final clean, which we'll talk about later, more is better than less in this situation, especially if you're cooking things that require a bit more oil to properly cook. Today I'm going to be cooking some asparagus potatoes with onions and peppers mixed in and some salmon. The asparagus and the potatoes were prepped. They were placed in these convenient 1-gallon size bags where I added some salt and oil. I tend not to add seasoning to anything that takes a while to cook, as some of it has a propensity to scorch or to lose the essential oils that make them taste good and smell good. I usually add my seasonings the last few minutes of the cooking to bring out the oils and to ensure that they're not going to scorch. All right, so let's get to cooking. One more quick check to make sure that my surface temp is where I want it to be, about 375 degrees for my asparagus, 400 for my potatoes. Asparagus goes on, I want to make sure that most of it's in contact with the cooking surface. My OCD tends to kick in here a little bit, making sure that everything's even, but that's also to make sure that as I'm cooking, I understand where my hot and cold spots are, and I can move the asparagus around to places that will help it more evenly cook. Same thing with the potatoes. I spread them evenly, make a couple passes and a few flips. I'm adding a little bit of extra oil here because I want them to fry a little bit more than my asparagus. Take a few minutes for everything to look good. As I said, a little bit later on in that cooking process, I'll start to add my seasonings, a little bit of onion powder in this case, and garlic powder to my potatoes. Now that everything's cooked and removed from the griddle, I want to give my cooking surface a light scrape and clean. Part of this is to remove any of the gunked up material that might still be on the griddle before I place my salmon onto it. Depending on what you're cooking, some materials you want to leave behind. If it's bacon, goes great with adding in potatoes or hash browns afterwards. But in this case, I don't want any of the flavors to bleed in from the asparagus to the salmon. So what I'll do is wipe down the griddle, add about a teaspoon of oil to remove any of the residual flavors, sort of kind of washing the griddle, I guess. And then once that's done, I'll then raise it to temp for my salmon. At this point, I'm raising the temperature to about 475 degrees. It's a little bit hotter than what I want this salmon to cook at. The griddle will drop about 25 degrees in this case with this slab of salmon. So putting on a 475 brings me down to a cooking temp of about 450. I'm going to add a little bit more oil because I feel the need to add a little bit more. The salmon will then get flipped on its back. I'll check the internal temperature, make sure that it's at the temperature I want. In this case, 120 degrees. I like my salmon to be 125 or 130, so once it reaches 120 in the thickest part, I'll take it off, I'll drop it in some foil, let it raise another 5 to 10 more degrees. One thing I do want to note is that I have my grill off to the side. Currently one burner is on, set to low, so that I can move all of my plattered food onto the grill just to keep warm as I'm cooking other things. All right, so I just finished a relatively light meal, nothing that created a lot of drama for the surface. No heavy fats from bacon or acidic fruits or vegetables like onions, nor did I use any sugary or heavy marinades that would cause a lot of carbon buildup. Even still, I'm going to walk through how I would clean this griddle either way. The first thing I do is I bring my temperature to up around 500 degrees. What I found is that you shouldn't be exerting a lot of force to remove gunk, and you shouldn't need to raise the temperature so high that you compromise your seasoning. So for me, 500 degrees is high enough that allows me to easily remove any caked on materials from the surface while not damaging my seasoning. Now at this point, my griddle is actually in pretty good shape. I can literally wipe off the excess of oil and turn the griddle off and call it a day. But if you still have some excessive oil or materials that didn't fully come off with the scraper, or feel the need to just clean it a bit more, you can add a couple cups of water like I do here. Again, with the surface temperature at about 500 degrees, pour the 2 cups of water onto the griddle surface, making sure that you're moving the water away from you as you pour so that you don't have any flash steam that kicks up and burns your hand. You don't need to let this water sit on the griddle for too long. Most of the work's done in the first few seconds. Use your scraper again here to move anything to your collection pan. You'll see that the griddle looks dry in some spots and oily in others. This is totally normal. As long as you're happy that you got up most of anything that's been baked on or caked on as part of your griddle, begin to wipe it down with paper towels. Your griddle is going to cool significantly after you add the water, so at this point, wait until the griddle gets back to about 350 degrees before you apply your sealing coat. With the griddle back up to 350 degrees, we're going to apply a sealant coat. Remember, this isn't a seasoning coat. It's just meant to protect the surface of the griddle until the next time you cook on it. Don't expect this coating to last a few months though. The oil will oxidize within a few weeks, and with that, it will require you to do a little bit more prep the next time you cook on it. As you can see here, I'm adding oil as part of the final sealant coat. It's important that you don't put too much on. You want just enough oil that when you're using your paper towel, you're pushing it around and really have to try hard to coat the entire surface of the griddle. Here I'm using about a tablespoon for 36 inches. If you put on a little too much oil, just continue to buff the surface with paper towels until you reach more of a matte finish than a glossy finish. I hope you found this video informative in some way. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, or feedback, please shoot them my way. I'm always looking to learn and to help refine my use of the Blackstone. And just remember, this isn't an anxiety-inducing process. It's supposed to be relaxing. And the best thing we all can do is just keep cooking.